Some questions don't leave you alone. You can be busy, surrounded by people, scrolling, working, living your life. And still they return. Late at night, in quiet moments, when the world finally slows down. Questions like, what came before us? What was lost? And what if history isn't finished telling its story? If you've ever felt that pull, that quiet curiosity you can't explain, then you're not alone. And you're exactly where you're meant to be. Because this journey isn't about facts alone. It's about the feeling that something doesn't quite add up. That the past still has unfinished business with us. Tonight we're not rushing. We're not shouting. We're not chasing shock or spectacle. We're slowing down, listening, and stepping carefully into the unknown. Because history doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers. History is often presented as a straight line, a clean timeline, cause-effect conclusion. But real history is messier than that. It bends, it fractures, it forgets. Entire civilizations rise, flourish, and vanish, sometimes without explanation. Cities disappear. Knowledge fades. Stories survive only as echoes. And every time we believe we have the full picture, something doesn't fit. A structure too precise for its time. A manuscript no one can read. A disappearance with no remains. A technology that seems to arrive far too early. We call these things mysteries. But maybe they're something else. Maybe they're reminders that we don't know nearly as much as we think we do. Look around the world. Across deserts, oceans, jungles, and ice, we find traces of human achievement that challenge our assumptions. Massive stones placed with impossible accuracy. Astronomical knowledge embedded in ancient sites. Legends shared across cultures that never met, stories of floods, lost lands, and fallen golden ages. How did distant civilizations develop similar ideas without contact? Why do myths repeat the same themes across continents? And why do some discoveries force experts to quietly revise timelines we once thought were settled? These questions don't threaten history. They deepen it. And they remind us that curiosity is not weakness. It's how progress begins. Tonight, we begin at the edge of memory. Not with certainty, not with proof, but with possibility. Because before written history, before recorded dates, there were people. They observed the stars. They shaped stone. They told stories to remember who they were and where they came from. Some of those stories survived. Others were buried. And a few refused to stay silent. Far out beyond familiar coastlines, beneath dark and restless waters, legends speak of a place that should not exist, and yet refuses to be forgotten. A land of order and balance, of advanced knowledge and careful design. A society said to be powerful, enlightened, and deeply flawed. A civilization that vanished in a single, catastrophic moment. Not gradually, not peacefully. Gone. The story comes to us through ancient words, not as a map, but as a warning. A tale of brilliance undone by arrogance, of harmony lost to excess. Some say it was never real. A metaphor, a lesson wrapped in myth. Others believe it was memory, distorted by time, but rooted in truth. And that is where the tension begins. Because if this place never existed, why does it feel so familiar? Across cultures separated by oceans, we find eerily similar ideas. A great flood, a lost homeland, an advanced people who fell from grace. From stone tablets to oral traditions, the same themes repeat. Knowledge gained, power abused, destruction unleashed. Coincidence or collective memory. When something appears once, it can be dismissed. When it appears everywhere, it demands attention. Modern science tells us that Earth is not stable. Oceans rise and fall. Plates shift. Climate changes dramatically over time. Entire coastlines have disappeared beneath the sea since the last ice age. Places that were once inhabited are now unreachable, sealed under hundreds of feet of water. So the question is no longer could a civilization have been lost. It's how many already were. Still, skepticism matters. Extraordinary claims require evidence, and speculation alone is not enough. That's why this mystery has endured. No definitive ruins, no undisputed artifacts, no proof that silences all doubt. And yet the search continues. Because sometimes absence is not emptiness. Sometimes it's an invitation. Researchers have proposed many locations. Volcanic islands shattered by ancient eruptions. Sunken coastlines near continental shelves. Regions known to have suffered sudden natural disasters. In some places, strange stone formations rest beneath shallow waters. In others, sonar images suggest unnatural symmetry, shapes that resemble roads, walls, or platforms. But nature is a master illusionist. What looks artificial may not be. What feels intentional may be coincidence. And so every discovery raises the same question. Is this the trace of something lost? Or our desire to find meaning where none exists? Yet, even critics admit something important. Ancient humans were not primitive. They observed the sky with precision. They engineered on massive scales. They organized labor, resources, and knowledge in ways that still impress us today. We underestimate them because we measure intelligence by technology, not by understanding. And that misunderstanding may be the greatest gap between us and the past. What if knowledge doesn't always move forward? What if it sometimes resets? History shows us that progress is fragile. Libraries burn. Cities collapse. Languages die. And when systems fall, knowledge often falls with them. Could an advanced society have existed, only to be erased so completely that we mistake its absence for impossibility? It's a dangerous idea. not because it's thrilling, but because it humbles us. And that may be why this story refuses to fade. Because it mirrors us, our cities near the sea, our dependence on fragile systems, our belief that collapse is something that happens to others. The story isn't just about the past. It's about warning. As we move forward, we won't rush to conclusions. We'll examine what is known, what is debated, and what remains unanswered. We'll separate myth from measurement without dismissing either too quickly. Because mystery doesn't demand belief. It demands attention. And so, as the waves close over legends and time smooths the edges of memory, we leave this question suspended, not answered, not dismissed. Was this lost world a metaphor, or a memory buried beneath the sea? And if something like it once existed, what does that mean for us now? This is only the beginning. Because beyond drowned lands and ancient warnings, there are other mysteries waiting, written in wood, stone, blood, and silence. And in the next chapter, we'll move from the depths of the ocean to the edge of a new world, where an entire community vanished, leaving behind only a single word and a question that has haunted history ever since. There is something deeply unsettling about empty places. Not ruins shaped by time. Not buildings worn down by centuries. But places that were once alive, and then suddenly weren't. No signs of struggle. No bodies. No final message explaining what happened. Just absence. Because when people vanish without explanation, the silence feels louder than any scream. Along a quiet stretch of coastline, where marsh grass bends with the wind and waves roll in without urgency, there is an island that looks peaceful, almost gentle. The kind of place where you would expect stories of beginnings, not endings. Yet beneath its calm surface lies one of the most haunting mysteries in history. An entire community disappeared, and all they left behind was a single word. In the late 16th century, the world was expanding. Oceans were no longer barriers, they were invitations. Empires pushed outward, chasing land, trade, and permanence. Across the Atlantic, a small group of settlers arrived with hope heavy in their chests. Families, craftsmen, children. They weren't soldiers preparing for conquest. They were people trying to build a life. They cleared land, built homes, planted crops, and for a moment, just a moment, it worked. Life on the edge of the unknown was hard. Food was uncertain. Supplies were limited. The land was unfamiliar, and survival depended on fragile relationships with those who already lived there. Still, the settlement endured. And when their leader left to seek help, promising to return, they believed they could hold on. They carved out a place for themselves. They waited. But time did not move as planned. War across the ocean delayed his return. Weeks became months. Months became years. When he finally came back, what he found changed history forever. The settlement was gone, not destroyed, not burned, not overtaken. Gone. Homes dismantled carefully. Defensive structures removed. No signs of violence. No graves. No remains. It was as if the people had stood up one day and walked away together. Only one thing remained. A word carved into wood. A clear, intentional, undamaged by time. Not a cry for help. Not a warning. Just a name. And that single word has echoed across centuries ever since. At first glance, the simplest explanation feels comforting. Maybe they left willingly. Maybe they moved to safer land. Maybe they joined nearby communities to survive. History often prefers answers that feel human and practical. And yet, the more closely we look, the more uneasy those explanations become. Because survival usually leaves traces. Tools, settlements, stories passed down. Here, there was nothing solid enough to end the debate. Some theories suggest peaceful integration, that the settlers were absorbed into nearby societies, slowly losing their identity as generations passed. There are hints. Later explorers reported meeting people with unfamiliar features. Stories of communities where strange customs lingered. European objects appearing far from where they should have been. But hints are not proof, and oral memory fades. Other ideas are darker. Illness, famine, conflict. The land was unforgiving, and life balanced on a knife's edge. Yet even tragedy leaves signs. Weapons, mass graves, broken structures. Here the evidence remains stubbornly absent. And then there is the detail that refuses to be ignored. Nothing was abandoned in haste. Homes were taken apart, not left standing. Supplies were removed, not scattered. No panic. No chaos. This wasn't a flight in the night. It was a decision. And that raises a deeper question. What would make an entire community leave together without leaving a message explaining why? Some suggest natural disaster. Storms powerful enough to reshape coastlines. Floods that erase footprints and swallow settlements whole. Nature is capable of incredible violence. But even nature leaves scars. And here the land remained strangely intact. As the years passed, the mystery grew. Searches continued. Theories multiplied. And slowly the story shifted. From history to legend. When answers fail to appear, imagination fills the space. Some believe the settlers split into smaller groups, scattered, survived briefly, then faded into the wilderness. Others imagine betrayal, or fear, or a decision made under pressure we no longer understand. And some go further still into speculation. Stories of curses, of forbidden lands, of warnings ignored. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is simpler. Perhaps we will never know. Because history does not preserve everything equally. It remembers kings better than farmers, battles better than survival, monuments better than choices made quietly. And this was a quiet decision, if it was a decision at all. Standing there today, the island feels unchanged. Birds circle overhead. The wind moves gently through the trees. Water laps against the shore as it always has. It doesn't feel haunted. It feels paused, as if something unfinished is still waiting. The carved word has become more than evidence. It's a symbol of trust placed in the future, of a message meant to be understood by someone who never arrived in time. It is the last known trace of people who believed they would be found. What happened to them matters, not because of who they were, but because of what their disappearance represents. It reminds us how fragile permanence really is, how easily lives slip out of the record, how quickly certainty turns into silence. We build stories around stone and paper, but human history is often written in footprints, and footprints vanish. Entire lives erased not by catastrophe, but by time. As we move forward, the mystery deepens. Because this was not the last time history lost people without explanation. Across the world, civilizations would rise and leave behind wonders, only for the knowledge of how they were built to disappear. Structures too precise, alignments too accurate, achievements too advanced for the timelines we assign them. And that brings us to the next question. Not about disappearance, but about creation. How did ancient people accomplish feats we still struggle to fully explain? And what does that say about what they knew that we may have forgotten? In the next chapter, we turn our eyes to the desert, to monuments that have stood for thousands of years, to stone shaped with intention, precision, and purpose, and to a question that refuses to settle quietly. How did they do it, and what did they understand that we do? There are places in the world that make you instinctively quiet, not because someone tells you to be, but because something in you understands that noise would feel wrong. You feel it before you think it. A sense that what you're standing in front of is older than memory and larger than explanation. The desert is unforgiving. The sun presses down without mercy. The wind moves sand endlessly, erasing tracks as soon as they appear. And yet, rising from this harsh, shifting landscape, there are structures that have not moved for thousands of years. They do not bend. They do not crumble. They do not forget. They stand. From a distance, they look simple. Clean lines, solid shapes, order carved into chaos. But as you draw closer, that simplicity dissolves. The scale overwhelms you first. Stone blocks taller than a person, heavier than modern trucks, stacked with a precision that leaves almost no space between them. No mortar, no glue, just stone meeting stone perfectly. You run your fingers along the surface. The joints are so tight a blade cannot slip between them. And suddenly, a quiet question forms in your mind. So, we are told a story. That ancient people were limited. That without machines, without electricity, without modern tools, their capabilities were narrow. But these stones challenge that belief. They do not look experimental. They do not look accidental. They look intentional, confident, as if the builders knew exactly what they were doing. The common explanation sounds reasonable at first. Large workforces, simple tools, years of labor, humans pulling together toward a shared goal. And yes, people are capable of incredible things when united. But when you look closely, the details begin to strain that explanation. Some stones weigh tens of tons. They were cut with remarkable consistency, transported across long distances, lifted into place with accuracy that rivals modern construction. Even today, recreating these feats would require planning, technology, and coordination on a massive scale. So how was it done then? We know this much. The builders understood geometry. They understood balance. They understood alignment, not just with the land, but with the sky. The structures face cardinal directions with astonishing accuracy. Their proportions reflect mathematical relationships we still study. This was not brute force alone. This was knowledge. Inside, the complexity deepens. Passageways angled precisely. Chambers positioned with intention. Spaces that interact with sound, weight, and pressure in ways that feel deliberate. Nothing feels random. Every decision feels measured. And yet, for all we have learned, something remains just out of reach. Tools have been found. Copper implements, stone hammers, evidence of skilled labor. But tools alone do not explain mastery. They explain what was used, not how it was understood. And that gap matters, because knowledge does not come from tools. Tools come from knowledge. And the builders clearly knew things we struggle to explain fully. There are theories, of course. Ramps built from earth and stone. Systems of levers and sleds. Wet sand reducing friction. Ingenious solutions born of necessity. And many of these ideas likely played a role. But none fully account for the scale, speed, and precision required. Not without unanswered questions. How were angles measured so accurately without modern instruments? How were internal chambers aligned so precisely? How did workers communicate complex plans across thousands of people without written blueprints as we understand them today? And perhaps most importantly, how was this knowledge preserved long enough to complete such monumental projects? Because this wasn't a single generation's work. It required continuity, training, standards, a shared understanding passed down reliably. And continuity is fragile, especially in ancient times. What makes this even more unsettling is that this level of precision appears suddenly. There is no clear, gradual evolution, no long trail of trial and error. One moment, simple structures, then mastery. It's as if the builders stepped onto the stage, already knowing the final act. Some suggest lost techniques, methods of stone cutting no longer used, ways of measuring that relied on natural constants rather than tools, knowledge embedded in ritual, practice, and memory, not books. If so, it raises an uncomfortable possibility. That knowledge can be lost without destruction. That understanding can vanish quietly when the people who carry it disappear. We often imagine collapse as dramatic. Fire, war, conquest. But history shows us another pattern. Slow forgetting, skills no longer taught, methods no longer needed, traditions abandoned as priorities change. And within a few generations, mastery becomes mystery. There is also the question of purpose. Officially, these structures were built as tombs, monuments to the dead. But that explanation feels incomplete. The complexity far exceeds what burial alone would require. And not all features align neatly with funerary use. So why build this way? Why such precision? Why such scale? Why align with the stars? Some believe the builders were expressing something deeper. A connection between earth and sky. A belief that human order should reflect cosmic order. Architecture not just as shelter, but as statement, as message. Others wonder if the structures served multiple purposes. Ceremonial, symbolic, possibly functional in ways we don't yet understand. The truth may be layered, just like the stone itself. What is clear is this: the builders were not guessing. They were executing a plan. And plans require understanding. Standing there today, the silence feels intentional. The stones do not explain themselves. They do not need to. They simply endure, watching generations come and go, watching theories rise and fall, unmoved by our certainty. And perhaps that is the lesson, that the past is not obligated to make sense to us, that our timelines are approximations, not truths, that intelligence does not follow a straight line. We like to believe we are the peak, that progress always moves forward. But history suggests otherwise. Civilizations rise. They master their world. And then they fall, sometimes taking their greatest knowledge with them. So when we look at these stones and feel unsettled, it's not because they defy physics. It's because they challenge our assumptions about who came before us, about what they were capable of, about how much has been forgotten. And this is not an isolated case. Across the world, similar questions appear. Monuments that resist explanation. Sites aligned with stars continents apart. Techniques repeated without clear connection. Each one alone could be coincidence. Together, they form a pattern. As we leave the desert behind, the question lingers. Not how they built, but what else they knew, and where that knowledge went. Because somewhere between these stones and our modern world, something was lost. And in the next chapter, we move away from stone and into shadow, from monuments that endure to crimes that vanish into fog, where the mystery is not about ancient builders, but about a human presence that slipped into darkness and was never seen again. Some mysteries are carved in stone. Others move. They breathe. They hide. They look back at us from the dark. And those are often the hardest to understand. Because when a mystery involves people, real lives, real fear, it doesn't stay in the past. It lingers. Imagine a city that never truly sleeps. Streets alive with footsteps. Voices overlapping in countless directions. Windows glowing faintly against the night. Now imagine that same city holding its breath. The year is drawing to a close. Cold air clings to narrow streets. Fog drifts low, swallowing corners and alleys. Gas lamps flicker. And somewhere within this maze of sound and shadow, something is wrong. At first, it doesn't feel like history. It feels like rumor. Whispers passing from doorway to doorway. A sense of unease that spreads faster than facts. People lock their doors earlier. Footsteps quicken. Eyes scan the dark more carefully than before. Then the news breaks. Not once. Not twice. Again. And again. The victims are real people. Women with names. Lives shaped by hardship and survival. Often overlooked while alive, remembered only after death. The details are disturbing. Too deliberate. Too precise. This is not random violence. This is intention. The city reacts. Authorities patrol the streets. Crowds gather. Newspapers print bold headlines that scream fear into every home. A name appears. One chosen not by proof, but by terror. And once spoken aloud, it cannot be taken back. Letters arrive. Some mocking. Some threatening. Some possibly fake. Ink on paper becomes a weapon. Whether written by the killer or not, the damage is done. Fear now has a voice. People want certainty. A face. A motive. An ending. But certainty never arrives. Investigators work with what they have, which is very little. No modern forensics. No reliable databases. No clear suspects who fit cleanly. Just fragments. Witness accounts that contradict each other. Clues blurred by time, weather, and panic. And a city filled with people who all look like strangers in the fog. Theories emerge. Perhaps the killer was skilled with tools. Perhaps familiar with anatomy. Perhaps someone who blended in easily. A butcher. A doctor. A tradesman. Someone ordinary enough to disappear in plain sight. Names are whispered. Lives examined. Some suspects seem promising until they don't. One is unstable. Another dies suddenly. Another leaves town. Each theory collapses under scrutiny. Each answer opens a new question. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. No final message. No capture. No confession. The killings end. The city exhales slowly, cautiously. But relief does not erase uncertainty. Because when something ends without explanation, the mind keeps working. Searching. Replaying. Filling in gaps that refuse to close. Years pass. Then decades. The streets change. Buildings are replaced. The city grows louder, brighter. But the shadow remains. Not in the alleys anymore, but in memory. The mystery becomes something else. Not just a crime, but a question about identity. How can someone commit acts that horrify millions and still vanish? How can a person leave such a mark and leave nothing behind? Modern minds return to the case with new tools, new science, new confidence. Surely now we can solve it. Old evidence is re-examined, letters tested, objects analyzed, profiles constructed. Technology promises answers. But time is cruel to truth. Evidence degrades. Records vanish. Objects pass through too many hands. What remains is incomplete. Some claim breakthroughs. A DNA match. A newly discovered document. A confession uncovered after death. Each time hope rises. And each time doubt follows close behind. Because certainty demands more than possibility. And possibility is all we ever seem to get. The case becomes a mirror. People see what they want to see. A monster. A madman. A symbol of a broken society. Some argue the killer was brilliant. Others say he was lucky. Some believe he was powerful. Others believe he was invisible. But perhaps the most unsettling idea is this. What if there was nothing extraordinary about him at all? What if he was simply forgettable? History often remembers extremes. Kings, heroes, villains with clear faces. But the most frightening figures are sometimes those who leave no impression at all. Those who walk among us unnoticed. The shadow becomes legend. Books are written. Films are made. The story takes on a life of its own. The victims fade into the background, their lives overshadowed by the mystery of their deaths. And yet the real question remains unanswered. Not who he was, but how he disappeared. Cities are meant to record people, addresses, jobs, neighbors. But anonymity is easier than we like to admit, especially in places overflowing with humanity. A person can vanish without leaving, simply by continuing to exist, changing routine, moving streets, living quietly. No dramatic escape required. Just time. That realization is uncomfortable because it suggests something about us. That even surrounded by millions, people can remain unseen. That evil does not always announce itself. That some stories never end, they just stop being told. Standing in those streets today, nothing looks the same. Modern lights replace gas lamps. Cars replace footsteps. Noise replaces fog. And yet, if you stand still long enough, there's a sense that something passed through here. Something unresolved. This mystery endures not because it is unsolved, but because it reminds us of vulnerability, of how thin the line is between safety and chaos, of how little separates ordinary life from sudden darkness. And so the shadow remains, not as a person, but as a question, one that history keeps asking and never answers. As we leave these streets behind, we move from human violence to human absence, from a single figure lost in fog to thousands lost in silence. Because the next mystery is not about one person who vanished, but an entire force that disappeared from the record, an army that marched forward and never returned. History remembers its victories. It carves them into stone, writes them into scrolls, repeats them until they feel permanent. But when history loses something, it grows strangely quiet. And sometimes what it loses isn't a city. It isn't a king. It's an entire army. Imagine thousands of men, trained, disciplined, organized. They march together beneath banners that have crossed continents. They carry weapons polished by experience. They move with confidence earned through survival. This is not a group that disappears easily. And yet they do. The land they enter is cold. Wind sweeps across open ground, bending tall grasses and low shrubs. The sky feels closer here, heavy and gray. The terrain is uneven, unpredictable, and unfamiliar. It is the edge of the known world. Beyond it lies resistance. For years, this force has been a symbol of order. Where it goes, roads follow. Forts rise. Borders shift. It is the physical shape of an empire's will. And now it stands at the frontier. At first, nothing seems unusual. Messages arrive as expected. Supplies move along familiar routes. The rhythm of military life continues. Then the record changes. Not dramatically, quietly. Mentions become fewer. Reports shorten. Names that once appeared regularly stop appearing altogether. And then nothing. No final battle recorded. No retreat documented. No triumph celebrated. Just absence. For an empire obsessed with structure and documentation, this silence is unsettling. Armies do not simply vanish. Even defeat leaves evidence. Weapons are lost. Bodies are buried. Stories are told, even if altered to save pride. Here, there is none of that. Scholars begin to ask questions. Was there a catastrophic defeat? Perhaps an ambush in hostile territory? Terrain that favored defenders? Weather that turned against them? The land was dangerous. The resistance was fierce. This explanation feels plausible, until one detail disrupts it. There is no battlefield, no mass graves, no remnants large enough to explain the loss of so many. Time erases much, but not everything. Another idea emerges. Perhaps the army didn't die here. Perhaps it left, transferred quietly to another frontier, redeployed without ceremony. Empires move pieces constantly. Names change. Units merge. Records shift. This happens. But again, the evidence refuses to cooperate. Fragments of inscriptions appear elsewhere. Hints of movement. Possibilities. But nothing definitive. Nothing that explains why such a respected force would vanish without acknowledgement. The silence deepens, and silence invites imagination. Stories spread that the army marched north and never returned, that it was swallowed by terrain too wild to conquer, that it was erased by enemies who knew the land better. Some say the men were captured. Others say they scattered. Some even imagine survivors integrating into local populations, losing language, identity, memory. There is something haunting about that idea. Not death, but disappearance. Lives continuing, unrecorded. Names forgotten. Because history only remembers what is written. And if no one writes your ending, you don't get one. Centuries later, researchers walk the same ground. They search for metal, for patterns in the soil, for anything that confirms or denies the theories. They find pieces, a fragment of armor, a coin far from home, a broken weapon. But fragments tell many stories, and none tell the whole truth. What stands out most is not what we find. It's what we don't. No official explanation ever arrives. No decisive proof. The army fades from lists. Its name disappears from future deployments, as if it never existed. And that is perhaps the most disturbing part. Not that an army fell, but that it could be erased so completely. Empires rely on memory, on records, on continuity. And when something as large as a legion vanishes, it creates a gap that should not exist. Yet here it is, a hole in history. Some believe the truth was deliberately buried, that admitting the loss would weaken authority. That silence preserved power. Empires are skilled at shaping narratives. They remember what benefits them and forget what doesn't. Others argue the truth was never known even then. That confusion followed disaster. That survivors were too few to tell a clear story. That chaos consumed clarity. And then there are those who believe the disappearance itself is the message. That history sometimes warns us not with explanation, but with absence. Standing on that land today, nothing announces tragedy. No monument marks loss. No plaque explains what happened. Just open ground, wind, a silence. And that silence feels intentional, as if the land itself refuses to speak. Thousands of lives once passed through here. Men who had families, who carried memories of distant homes, who believed in structure, command, and order. They marched with purpose. And then history let go. It's tempting to search for drama, a final stand, a heroic defeat. But perhaps the truth was quieter, more confusing, more human. Because not every ending is clear. Not every story concludes with resolution. Some simply stop being told. This mystery lingers because it disrupts expectation. Because scale does not protect from oblivion. Because power does not guarantee remembrance. And that is a thought that echoes beyond this army. If thousands can vanish without explanation, what else has history misplaced? What knowledge? What stories? What truths? As we move forward, the focus shifts again. From people lost in landscape to knowledge trapped in symbols. A book that refuses to be read. A language that resists understanding. A message written with intention, yet never meant for us. In the next chapter, we step away from battlefields and into pages, into ink and parchment, into a mystery that does not disappear, but stares back unread. Some mysteries are loud. They announce themselves with destruction, with disappearance, with shock. Others are quiet. They sit patiently on shelves. They wait in rooms filled with light. They ask nothing and yet demand everything. This is one of those mysteries. Imagine holding a book in your hands. Its pages are old. The material feels different from modern paper. Thicker, heavier. You turn a page. The writing is careful, consistent, confident, and yet you cannot read a single word. At first, this feels impossible. Writing is meant to communicate. Language exists to be understood. So when something is written with such clarity, but offers no meaning, it unsettles us. Because it feels deliberate. This book is not damaged. The pages are intact. The ink has not faded into noise. The symbols repeat in patterns that feel intentional. This is not random scribbling. This is structure. There are illustrations. Plants that look almost familiar, but not quite. Figures arranged in strange scenes. Circular diagrams that suggest movement, cycles, order. Nothing looks careless. Nothing looks rushed. Every page feels like it belongs exactly where it is. And that raises the question: if this book is meaningless, why does it feel so carefully made? Scientists study the text, not for meaning but for pattern. They examine how often symbols repeat, where they appear, how they combine. The results are surprising. The structure behaves like real language. Words repeat in predictable ways. Certain symbols appear only at beginnings or endings. Some combinations never occur. This is not chaos, but it is not any known language either. Not ancient, not modern, not borrowed or blended. It stands alone. For centuries, people have tried to solve it. Scholars, linguists, code breakers. Some believed it hid scientific knowledge. Others thought it was medical, astronomical, spiritual. Each theory made sense until it didn't. The book has a history. It appears suddenly in records. Already old. Already complete. No drafts. No notes. No explanation of origin. Just presence. Some believe it was meant to conceal information. A cipher designed to protect knowledge from the uninitiated. That idea feels reasonable. Human history is filled with secret writing. But there's a problem. Most ciphers are eventually broken. Patterns repeat too perfectly. Mistakes creep in. Keys are reused. This book resists all of that. Others suggest something stranger. That the language itself was invented. A constructed system created not to hide meaning, but to express it differently. Not through translation, but through experience. If so, then perhaps the book isn't meant to be read the way we read. Perhaps it's meant to be understood slowly. Or not at all. There is another unsettling possibility. That the book is a hoax. A brilliant one. A work of immense effort designed to look meaningful while saying nothing. But that explanation struggles too. Because hoaxes usually aim for payoff. Recognition. Reaction. Reward. This book offers none. It does not explain itself. It does not seek attention. It simply exists. What makes this mystery different is that it does not rely on absence. The book is here. It has survived wars, fires, neglect, and time. It sits quietly where anyone can see it. And yet it remains unreachable. Modern technology enters the story. Computers analyze patterns faster than any human ever could. They compare the text to thousands of known languages. They search for keys. They simulate translations. And they come back with the same answer. There is structure. There is intention. There is no solution. Some researchers notice something else. The book behaves like natural language, but only partially, as if it mirrors how language works without fully committing, as if it understands the idea of meaning, without revealing it. That observation changes the tone of the mystery, because it suggests something unsettling, that the book may not be hiding meaning. It may be performing it. Think about that for a moment. What if the purpose of this book is not to convey information, but to demonstrate the act of communication itself? Symbols arranged to resemble knowledge, illustrations that feel explanatory without explaining, a book that looks like it should teach you something, but never does. Why would someone do that? Perhaps as an experiment, perhaps as philosophy, perhaps as a reflection on the limits of understanding, or perhaps as a message not meant for us. We often assume knowledge is universal, that if something was written, it was written for us or for people like us. But history challenges that assumption. Knowledge is contextual, bound to culture, to training, to shared reference. Without that context, meaning collapses. What if this book was written for a community that no longer exists? A group who shared the symbols, the references, the logic, and without them, the text becomes mute. This idea connects quietly to the mystery we've already seen. Civilizations that vanish, armies that disappear, knowledge that does not survive collapse. Perhaps this book is not strange at all. Perhaps it is simply orphaned. That thought carries weight, because it reframes the mystery. The book is not refusing to speak. It has no one left to listen. And yet it continues to draw attention. Because it feels intentional. Because every page suggests care. Because someone once believed it mattered. When you look at it, you feel the presence of a mind behind the ink. Curious, methodical, patient. Someone who invested time into something that would not reward them immediately. Someone who believed the future might understand. But the future did not arrive as expected. Languages changed. Knowledge shifted. Context dissolved. And the book was left behind. We stand now on the other side of that gap, trying to reach across centuries with logic alone. And perhaps logic is not enough. This mystery endures not because it is unsolved, but because it resists being solved in the way we prefer. It does not collapse into a clear answer. It does not reward certainty. It asks us to sit with ambiguity. There is humility in that. A reminder that intelligence is not just about decoding. It is about knowing when understanding has limits. As long as this book exists, it will continue to challenge us. Not with what it says, but with what it withholds. And that brings us to a different kind of mystery. One not written in ink, but carved into the earth. A place where meaning may not be hidden in symbols, but aligned with the sky itself. Where stone and shadow interact with the movement of the sun. And where human intention reaches upward, towards something larger than language. In the next chapter, we step away from pages and into a circle of stone, where time itself becomes part of the design. Some places don't feel like ruins. They feel like questions, not abandoned, but waiting. The land is open here. Wide grass stretches in every direction, moving gently under an endless sky. The wind is steady, unhurried. Clouds drift as they always have, indifferent to centuries. And rising from this quiet landscape, a circle of stone stands in silence. Not towering, not ornate, just present. From afar, it looks simple. A few massive stones arranged with care. Some upright, some laid across the top. But as you approach, the feeling changes. You slow down without meaning to. Your voice drops. Something about the place asks for quiet. These stones have stood here for thousands of years. Before cities, before empires, before writing as we know it. They have watched generations pass. People who believed different things, spoke different languages, lived entirely different lives. And still the stones remain. The first question is always the same. Why here? The land itself offers no obvious answer. No mountains, no rivers converging, no natural shelter. And yet this place was chosen. Not once, but again and again. Because the structure did not rise all at once. It was built over generations. Adjusted, expanded, refined. People return to this spot repeatedly, across centuries, to shape it further. That matters, because it means this was not a single vision. It was a shared one. The stones themselves are enormous. Some weigh more than a fully loaded truck. They were transported from miles away, some from much farther. Across uneven ground. Without wheels. Without metal tools. This was not convenient. This was intentional. Why go to such effort? Why move stone instead of wood? Why build something that would outlast the builders themselves? The arrangement is not random. The stones are aligned, not just with each other, but with the sky. On certain days of the year, the sun rises or sets in perfect harmony with the structure. Light passes through specific gaps. Shadows fall exactly where they should. This was planned. To notice these patterns, you must observe patiently. You must track the sun's movement over time, over years, over lifetimes. This is not casual observation. This is knowledge earned slowly. The people who built this place understood cycles, seasons, solar movement, lunar rhythms. They were paying attention. And they were recording what they saw not on paper, but in stone. Some believe this place functioned as a calendar, a way to mark the turning of the year, to know when to plant, when to harvest, when to gather. That explanation feels reasonable, but it does not feel complete. Calendars do not require this scale. They do not require this effort. And they do not require stone moved from distant lands. Something else was happening here. Excavations around the site reveal clues. Burials, ceremonial objects, traces of gatherings. This was not just a structure. It was a destination. People came here. They brought their dead. They marked moments. They participated in something larger than daily life. Some researchers suggest healing, that the stones were believed to carry power, that people traveled long distances seeking relief, renewal, transformation. The human remains show signs of injury and illness, evidence of hope. Others believe this place was about ancestors, a connection between the living and the dead. Stone endures. Bodies do not. By building in stone, perhaps they believed memory could last. And then there is the sky. Always the sky. Many ancient cultures believed the heavens were not distant. They were active, influential, alive. The sun was not just a source of light. It was order. The moon was not just a companion. It was rhythm. By aligning stone with sky, perhaps these builders were trying to bring harmony to Earth, to reflect cosmic balance in human space. Architecture as conversation. What is striking is how universal this idea is. Across the world, distant cultures built monuments aligned with celestial events. They did this without shared language, without contact, without coordination. And yet the patterns repeat. This suggests something fundamental, that when humans look up at the sky long enough, they begin to think the same thoughts. Standing among the stones today, it is easy to forget time. There is no clear beginning here, no final purpose carved into the ground, just presence. And presence invites interpretation. We want clear answers, a label, a function, a conclusion. But this place resists that. It refuses to be reduced, because perhaps its purpose was not singular. Perhaps it was many things. A place to gather, a place to remember, a place to align human life with something greater. And perhaps that is why it still matters. Because it was not built for efficiency. It was built for meaning. Modern minds sometimes struggle with that. We build for speed, for convenience, for return. But ancient builders often worked differently. They built for permanence, for continuity, for people they would never meet. That is a powerful idea. To spend your life contributing to something you know you will not finish. To trust that others will continue. To believe that the future will care. As centuries passed, those who understood the original meaning faded. Languages changed. Beliefs shifted. Rituals ended. But the stone stayed. Now we arrive. Curious, uncertain, searching. We bring tools and theories. But we also bring imagination. Some explanations drift toward the extraordinary. Ideas of lost civilizations, hidden knowledge, external influence. While these ideas remain unproven, their persistence tells us something important. that this place feels significant beyond explanation. And significance is not always logical. Sometimes it is felt. When the sun rises through the stones on a certain morning, people still gather. They watch. They wait. They fall silent. And for a moment, thousands of years collapse into a single breath. That moment does not need explanation. It only needs presence. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is assuming this place must be solved, that it must yield its meaning completely. But some things are not puzzles. They are mirrors. This place reflects us back to ourselves, our desire to understand, our need to connect, our awareness of time passing beyond our control. The builders knew time mattered. That is why they marked it. That is why they anchored their world to the movement of the sky. And now, as we step away from this circle of stone, another question follows us. If ancient people could align earth and sky so precisely, what else did they observe? What else did they track? And what knowledge might still be hidden in the patterns of the heavens? Because the next mystery does not stand on land. It moves across water. It arrives suddenly. And it changes the course of history. Not through silence, but through destruction. In the next chapter, we turn toward the sea, toward ships on the horizon, toward a force that appeared without warning and reshaped an entire world before vanishing once again. The sea has always carried stories. Some arrive gently, like trade winds and familiar routes. Others arrive without warning. And when they do, history changes course. Picture the coastline at dawn. Harbors wake slowly. Fishermen prepare their nets. Markets stir with early voices. The water is calm. Nothing suggests danger. And then on the horizon, something appears. At first, it looks like shadows. Dark shapes rising and falling with the swell. Too many to be coincidence. As they draw closer, details sharpen. Ships. Not one. Not a few. Dozens. Oars cut through water in perfect rhythm. Sails catch the wind with practiced ease. These are not lost vessels. They move with purpose. Along the shore, word spreads. People gather. Some curious. Some uneasy. They have seen traders before. But this feels different. The ships reach land. Men disembark. They wear unfamiliar armor. Carry weapons shaped differently. Move as if they have done this many times before. They do not ask permission. They advance. By nightfall, the coast is burning. For generations, this region had been stable. Powerful kingdoms controlled trade routes. The cities thrived. Diplomacy held rivalries in balance. Then suddenly, everything begins to break. The cities fall. Walls once thought impenetrable crumble. Ports are overrun. Records stop abruptly. The pattern repeats across vast distances. Not just one place. Many. What makes this terrifying is not the destruction alone. It's the coordination. These attacks are not random raids. They are synchronized, as if guided by shared intent. Ancient records describe them briefly, not with clarity, with fear. They are referred to collectively, not as a nation, not as an empire, but as something looser, a movement. The texts struggle to name them, because naming implies understanding, and understanding never fully arrives. The accounts describe families arriving alongside warriors, women, children, livestock. This is not a hit-and-run force. This is migration. But migration armed for war. Wherever they appear, established powers weaken. Trade networks collapse. Alliances fracture. Entire systems fail under the pressure. The world enters a period of chaos. And then, as quickly as they appear, they fade. The great kingdoms that once dominated the region are gone or forever changed. New cultures emerge in their place. But the people who triggered the collapse are no longer clearly visible. They dissolve into the record. This raises an uncomfortable question. How can a force powerful enough to reshape the world leave behind so little trace? Archaeologists search for answers. They find destruction layers, burned cities, abandoned settlements, signs of sudden violence. But identifying the attackers is difficult. Material culture blends. Weapons resemble many origins. Pottery styles overlap. There is no single fingerprint, no clear homeland, no definitive origin. Some scholars believe these people came from multiple regions, displaced by famine, by climate change, by internal collapse elsewhere, pressed forward by desperation. Others believe they were opportunists, sailors who saw weakness and took advantage, groups who united temporarily under shared goals. Another possibility is more unsettling: that these people were not new at all, that they were already part of the world, living on its edges, waiting. When systems are strong, margins stay quiet. When systems weaken, margins move. The records that survive were written by those under attack, by rulers trying to explain collapse. And when explanation fails, fear fills the gaps. The descriptions grow dramatic, the language urgent. Enemies become monsters. Outsiders become forces of nature. This does not mean the accounts are false, but it does mean they are incomplete, because history is rarely written by those in motion. It is written by those trying to stay still. The sea people, if we can call them that, do not leave behind libraries. They do not carve monuments declaring victory. They pass through, and passage leaves fewer marks than permanence. Some groups settle. They blend. They adapt. Over time, their identity merges with local cultures. Names change. Origins blur. Others may have disappeared entirely, victims of the same instability they helped unleash. The world that follows looks different. Power shifts inland. Trade routes reroute. New technologies spread. Iron replaces bronze. Smaller kingdoms replace empires. This is not a clean transition. It is messy, painful, human. And that is why this mystery matters. Because it shows us something uncomfortable. That collapse does not always come from within. Sometimes it arrives from outside, carried by people with nowhere else to go. The sea does not care about borders. It connects as easily as it divides. And those who master it can move faster than history can record. Standing on those shores today, the water looks peaceful again. Tourists walk beaches where fire once fell. Boats drift where fleets once gathered. Time smooths over violence. But beneath the calm, the lesson remains. Civilizations are fragile. They depend on balance. And when balance breaks, change comes quickly. This mystery is not about villains. It is about movement, about pressure, about what happens when too many forces converge at once. Climate shifts, economic strain, political weakness. Together they create openings, and openings invite motion. The people who came with the waves were not inevitable, but they were possible. And that distinction matters, because it means history is not predetermined. It is shaped by choices, conditions, and chance. As we leave the coastline behind, another question follows us. If entire worlds can collapse under pressure, what happens to the knowledge they held, the systems they built, the understanding they cultivated? Some knowledge disappears forever. Some survives in fragments, and some hides in unexpected places. Not in cities, not in armies, but in jungles. In the next chapter, we travel inland, far from the sea, to a civilization that reached extraordinary heights, and then, just as mysteriously, walked away from its greatest cities. The jungle does not announce itself. It creeps, slowly, patiently, without urgency. Vines stretch, roots press into stone, leaves fall, decay, and become soil. And over time, even the greatest human achievements begin to disappear. Imagine standing at the edge of a dense forest. The air is heavy. Every sound feels close. Bird calls echo above you. Insects hum constantly. Nothing suggests that beneath your feet lies one of the most advanced civilizations the world had ever known. At first, explorers thought the stories were exaggerations. Tales of massive cities swallowed by greenery, of temples hidden under centuries of growth, of roads that stretched farther than the eye could see. It sounded impossible. And yet, step by step, stone began to emerge. A carved stairway here, a wall there, then plazas, pyramids, entire urban centers. Not one. Many. These were not small settlements. They were cities. Planned. Organized. Alive with ceremony, trade, and knowledge. At their height, millions lived here. The people who built these cities were extraordinary. They tracked the stars with precision, developed complex mathematics, recorded history in symbols carved into stone. They understood time, not just days and seasons, but cycles spanning generations. Their calendars were more accurate than those used in Europe centuries later. Their architecture aligned with celestial events. Their cities were engineered to manage water in challenging environments. This was not a fragile society. This was brilliance. And yet, the cities emptied, not burned, not conquered, abandoned. That detail changes everything, because collapse usually leaves chaos. This did not. Instead, people left. Slowly, gradually, as if responding to something unseen. The temples remained standing. The roads stayed intact. But the voices faded. For a long time, the mystery was framed incorrectly. People asked what destroyed them. But the better question is, why did they leave? The answer does not lie in a single event. It lies in pressure. The land they lived on was generous, but delicate. Farming sustained massive populations, but only with careful balance. Rainfall mattered. Soil mattered. Timing mattered. Evidence suggests the climate began to change. Not abruptly, but persistently. Droughts became longer. Rain became unpredictable. Water reservoirs dried. Crops failed. At the same time, the population was dense. Cities competed with one another. Power shifted. Conflict increased. Walls rose where none had been needed before. The society did not collapse all at once. It strained. When resources shrink, trust weakens. When trust weakens, unity fractures. Leaders struggle to maintain order. Rituals lose credibility. Belief systems are questioned. People begin to move. At first temporarily, then permanently. What is striking is that knowledge did not disappear with them. Not entirely. Some cities remained active longer than others. Some regions adapted. The culture continued, just differently. This was not extinction. It was transformation. Yet the cities themselves were never reclaimed. Once people left, the jungle moved in. Nature does not wait. Within decades, structures were hidden. Within centuries, forgotten. And without constant maintenance, even stone gives way. When modern technology allowed researchers to see beneath the forest canopy, the scale became clear. The civilization was far larger than previously believed. Road networks connected distant cities. Agricultural systems reshaped entire landscapes. This was not isolated brilliance. It was a networked world. So why abandon it? Perhaps because complexity has limits. When systems grow too large, they become sensitive. Small disruptions ripple outward. Adaptation becomes harder. The people who left may have made a rational choice, not to fight collapse, but to avoid it. This idea is unsettling because it reframes the story. The disappearance was not failure. It was survival. The forest does not conquer. It reclaims. And it reclaims quietly. Walking through these ruins today feels different from other ancient sites. There is no open sky. No wide horizon. Just green. Life everywhere. Stone walls breathe with moisture. Roots wrap around carved faces. Time feels thick. You are not standing in a dead place. You are standing in a place that changed. The mystery endures because the people left behind no final message. No inscription saying why. No warning. No explanation. But perhaps they didn't need to explain. Perhaps the knowledge was meant to move with them. Civilizations are not buildings. They are people. And when people leave, civilization leaves too. The stones are what remain. And stones cannot tell us everything. This mystery matters because it reflects a truth we struggle with today. That progress does not guarantee permanence. That intelligence does not prevent vulnerability. That survival sometimes means letting go. The jungle teaches patience. It shows us that human timelines are brief, that even the greatest achievements return to soil. And yet, something remarkable remains. Descendants, language fragments, traditions, memory carried forward quietly. The civilization did not vanish. It changed shape. This challenges how we define collapse. Perhaps it is not always destruction. Perhaps sometimes it is choice. As we step away from the forest, the question follows us. If a civilization can choose to leave its cities behind, what does that say about how we measure success? The next mystery shifts again. From cities reclaimed by nature to monuments carved deliberately to resist it. A structure shaped from living rock, neither fully human nor fully animal, watching the horizon for thousands of years. In the next chapter, we return to the desert, to a face worn by time, and to questions carved into stone that refuse to erode. There is a moment just before understanding fails, when certainty gives way to awe. It happens when you stand before something too old to argue with, something that has outlived belief systems, outlasted languages, endured while entire worlds rose and fell around it. And it watches you. The desert stretches outward in every direction. Sand glows softly under a pale sky. Wind moves across the plateau, reshaping the surface grain by grain. This land is not still. It is always changing. And yet, rising from the bedrock itself, there is a form that refuses to move. At first, you notice the scale. It is larger than photographs suggest. Wider, heavier. Then you notice the shape. A body carved directly from living stone. A lion's form stretched low against the earth. And above it, a human face. The expression is calm, not smiling, not angry, just present. Eyes fixed on the horizon, watching the sun rise again and again for thousands of years. No inscription explains it. No definitive record describes its creation. No clear message tells us why it exists. And yet it does. The most common explanation is straightforward: that it was built as a symbol of power, a guardian, a representation of authority fused with strength, human intelligence combined with animal dominance, a statement carved in stone. This explanation fits, but only partially, because the deeper you look, the more questions surface. The monument was carved from the same ridge of rock on which it rests. Not assembled, not transported, sculpted in place. This alone required planning on a massive scale. Once carved, there was no undoing it. Every decision mattered. The size is extraordinary. The body stretches longer than a modern airplane. The head alone towers above a person. This was not decorative. It was intentional. The face has changed over time. Erosion has softened features. Details have worn away. Yet the gaze remains. A steady, unyielding. Some researchers point to water erosion, patterns on the body that suggest prolonged exposure to rainfall. Rain heavy enough to shape stone over long periods. This is where the debate begins. Because the desert has not always been dry. There were times far earlier when rain fell more frequently here, when the climate was different, when grasslands covered areas now barren. If those erosion patterns are truly caused by water, then the monument may be far older than traditionally believed. Older by thousands of years. That possibility unsettles timelines. It pushes the monument back into an era we understand poorly. An era before established dynasties, before written records, before we assume such monumental work was possible. Not everyone agrees. Some argue the erosion can be explained by wind, sand, and time. That water patterns are misleading. That extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And they are right. But even within traditional timelines, questions remain. Why carve this figure at all? Why this form? Why this location? The monument aligns with the rising sun. Every morning, light strikes its face first, as if it was meant to witness the day being born. In ancient belief systems, the sun was not just light. It was order. It was rebirth. It was divine rhythm. Perhaps this monument was meant to connect earth and sky, to stand as an intermediary, neither fully human nor fully animal, neither fully earthly nor fully divine. The body suggests raw power. The face suggests consciousness. Together, they form a symbol that transcends function. This is not a tomb. It is not a temple. It does not enclose space. It occupies it. That distinction matters because it suggests purpose beyond utility. Throughout history, people returned to this monument. They repaired it, revered it, protected it, even when its original meaning may have been lost. That alone tells us something important. That whatever it represented, it mattered. Civilizations often destroy what they do not understand. Here they preserved it. Some believed it held spiritual power. Others believed it guarded sacred ground. Some saw it as a remnant of a golden age. Others as a symbol of kingship. And some believed it was much older, a survivor from a forgotten time. If that idea is true, even partially, it changes the story. Because it suggests continuity where we assume rupture. Knowledge passed down. Symbols inherited. Meaning layered rather than erased. Think about that. A monument created by one culture, adopted by another, reinterpreted by each generation. A stone witness to human reinterpretation itself. That would explain the ambiguity, the lack of clarity, the absence of a single answer. Because the monument may not belong to one moment. It may belong to many. Standing before it today, you feel something difficult to describe. Not fear, not reverence exactly. Something quieter. A sense of being watched by time itself. The face does not demand belief. It does not threaten. It simply observes. Thousands of years of sunrises, of storms, of silence, of footsteps approaching, pausing and leaving. Empires arrived. Empires fell. Languages were spoken, forgotten, replaced. And the monument remained. That endurance invites humility. Because it reminds us that our certainty is temporary. That what we know is always incomplete. That meaning can survive even when explanation does not. Perhaps that is why this mystery endures. Not because it hides an answer, but because it holds a mirror. It asks us what we expect from the past. Clear instructions, definitive proof, or the reminder that some things were built not to be solved, but to be experienced. The monument does not explain itself. It doesn't need to. It has already accomplished something remarkable. It has made us ask questions for thousands of years. And maybe that was the point. As the sun lowers and shadows stretch across the desert, the face darkens. The gaze does not change. It never has. And as we step away, another thought follows us. If ancient people were capable of shaping stone on this scale, of embedding meaning that transcends time, what else did they create? What else have we misunderstood? The next mystery takes us from carved stone to a missing body. Not just any body, but the remains of one of history's most influential figures. A conqueror whose reach reshaped the world, and whose final resting place has never been found. Some lives are so large that even death cannot contain them. They spill into legend. They reshape borders. They outlive their bodies. And yet, even the greatest lives must end. The mystery begins not with how this man lived, but with what happened after he died. He was young, too young to have done what he did. By the time most people are still finding their place in the world, he had already changed it. Empires bowed. Cities were founded. Cultures collided and merged under his shadow. From mountains to deserts, from rivers to seas, his name traveled faster than his armies. He was not content with ruling from a distance. He marched with his men, shared their hunger, endured the same heat and cold. He believed presence mattered, and because of that, his followers believed in him. When he fell ill, no one expected the end. Not yet. There were still plans. More lands to reach. More borders to push. The world was not finished. But death does not negotiate. When it came, it was quiet. No battlefield. No final charge. Just a body weakened, then still. The shock was immediate. An empire held together by one will suddenly had none. Generals watched each other carefully. Allies whispered. The future fractured before it could be decided. And in that moment, a question arose that still haunts history. What do you do with the body of a man who conquered the world? His remains were not just flesh and bone. They were symbol, power, authority. Where he rested would matter. Plans were made to return him home, to honor tradition, to lay him among ancestors. But tradition does not survive power struggles. The journey began. A procession unlike any other. Elaborate, heavily guarded, slow, his body preserved with great care. This was not merely transport. It was spectacle. Along the route, people gathered, not to see a corpse, but to witness continuity, to believe that even in death, order remained. But ambition followed closely behind. One of his most trusted commanders saw opportunity, not in life, but in death. The procession was diverted. Quietly, decisively, the body was claimed. It was brought to a city founded by the man himself. A city meant to be eternal. A city that bore his vision. There a tomb was prepared. Not hidden. Not modest. A place meant to inspire awe. Ancient accounts describe it. Gold, stone, ceremony. Visitors came. Rulers paid respects. Some touched the body. Some wept. Some saw legitimacy reflected in proximity. For centuries, the tomb was known. It was visited, documented, referenced, and then the references stop. The city changed. Earthquakes struck. Fires burned. New rulers arrived. Buildings collapsed. Streets shifted. And gradually, the tomb faded from record. Not destroyed. Lost. This is where the mystery deepens. Because losing such a tomb should be impossible. It was famous, important, central, and yet no one can say where it lies today. Archaeologists have searched beneath modern streets, under ruined structures, along ancient descriptions. Each discovery raises hope, and then disappointment. Some believe the tomb was destroyed, looted, its treasures scattered, its body moved or lost. Others believe it still lies beneath the city, buried under centuries of construction, waiting. There are theories that it was relocated secretly, to protect it, to prevent misuse, to remove its symbolic power from rivals. And there are more radical ideas, that the body was divided, hidden, or even mistaken for another. The truth is elusive, because time is not kind to certainty, and cities are layered. What once stood proudly can vanish beneath generations of rebuilding. Yet the fascination endures, because this is not just about a tomb. It's about legacy. This man reshaped the world, but in death his physical presence vanished, as if history itself decided to separate myth from matter. His influence survived. His body did not. There is something poetic about that. A conqueror who claimed everything, claimed nothing at the end. Standing in the city today, it is hard to imagine. Traffic flows where processions once moved. Voices replace silence. Life continues. And beneath it all, possibly, a tomb, undisturbed. If found, it would be one of the greatest discoveries in history. Not for gold, not for spectacle, but for understanding. It would reconnect us with a moment when the world stood still, when power was fragile, when the future could have gone in countless directions. And yet, perhaps it should remain lost. Perhaps some things are not meant to be reclaimed. Because mystery has power too. It keeps stories alive. It prevents closure. It forces humility. The absence of the tomb reminds us that no matter how vast a life becomes, time always has the final say. As we step away from this missing resting place, another question forms. If bodies can disappear, what about knowledge? What about technology? What about devices created so advanced they seem out of place in their time? In the next chapter, we descend beneath the sea, to a shipwreck, to corroded metal, and to a machine that should not exist, but does. Some discoveries feel like accidents, a wrong turn, a broken surface, a chance moment that reveals something hidden. Others feel inevitable, as if the object itself has been waiting patiently for the right moment to be seen. This is one of those. The sea is deceptive. From above, it looks calm, endless, empty, but beneath its surface lies a second world. Dark, pressurized, unforgiving, and scattered across that world are the remains of human ambition. A ship went down here long ago, not in a storm remembered by name, not in a battle recorded by poets, just a vessel lost to time. Its cargo sank slowly, settling into silence. When divers first reached it, they expected the usual. Statues, coins, ceramics, fragments of trade. And at first, that's what they found. Then someone lifted a corroded mass of metal. It was small, unremarkable, covered in marine growth. At a glance, it looked like debris, but something about it felt different. Too dense, too structured, not random. Back on land, the object was cleaned carefully. Layers of corrosion flaked away. And beneath them, gears. Not simple gears. Not crude shapes. But interlocking teeth cut with precision. Arranged deliberately. The room felt quiet. Because gears imply purpose. They imply calculation. They imply planning. This was not decoration. This was a machine. As researchers examined it further, disbelief set in. There were dozens of gears, each connected, each shaped differently, each serving a role. This kind of mechanism should not exist in this era, not according to the story we tell ourselves. For centuries, we believed complex mechanical systems arrived much later. That ancient technology was limited. That precision belonged to the modern world. This object disagreed. As imaging technology improved, more details emerged. Hidden inscriptions, dials, scales, markers. This was not a toy, not a curiosity. It was a calculator, but not of numbers alone, of time, of cycles, of the sky. The device tracked the movements of celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, possibly planets. It could predict eclipses, map recurring astronomical events, even align with major cultural cycles. All of this, built over 2,000 years ago. Let that settle. This level of complexity would not appear again for more than a millennium. And yet here it was, recovered from the sea, real, undeniable. The implications were staggering. If this device existed, what else did? Ancient texts mentioned advanced instruments, but without physical evidence, they were dismissed as exaggeration, metaphor, legend. Now there was proof, not a description, not a story, a machine. And machines do not appear spontaneously. They are the result of accumulated knowledge, of theory tested through practice, of understanding passed down. This device was not a first attempt. It was the product of refinement, which means there were others. So where did that knowledge go? The most unsettling part is not that the device existed. It's that it vanished. If one machine survived by accident, how many were lost intentionally? How many sank, burned, rusted, or were melted down? History favors survival, not significance. We know what lasts, not what mattered most. The ship that carried this device was likely transporting valuable cargo, possibly to a scholar, a ruler, a library. Imagine that. A machine built to explain the universe, lost before it reached its destination. The world never saw it. The knowledge never spread. The ideas it embodied never shaped the future. Instead, it slept underwater, waiting. Some researchers believe the device was educational, a teaching tool, a way to demonstrate cosmic order. Others believe it was ceremonial, a symbolic object representing harmony between human thought and the heavens. And some believe it was practical, used to plan events, to time rituals, to navigate. The truth may include all of these, because ancient thinkers did not separate science, philosophy, and belief. They were one system. That unity is what we have lost. Today, we divide knowledge into categories: physics, religion, engineering, art. But in the ancient world, understanding was holistic. This device reflects that. It is technical, but also poetic, precise, but also symbolic. When you look at it, you are not just seeing gears. You are seeing a worldview, a belief that the universe operates according to patterns, that those patterns can be observed, understood, predicted. This belief is foundational to modern science. And yet here it is, fully formed, long before we expected it. The device challenges a comfortable narrative. That progress is linear. That knowledge only accumulates. That the past is always simpler. History is not a straight line. It is a series of peaks and valleys. Discoveries made, lost, rediscovered. This machine represents a peak we forgot existed. And forgetting has consequences. Because when knowledge is lost, humanity must rebuild it from scratch. Think of the centuries spent relearning what was once known. The delays, the detours, the false starts. What if progress is not about invention, but about recovery? The machine also raises a personal question. How much of what we consider modern is actually ancient? We pride ourselves on innovation, but innovation often means rediscovery with new tools. The past is not behind us. It is beneath us. This device survived because it fell into water, because corrosion protected it, because no one found it sooner. That irony is difficult to ignore. Knowledge preserved by accident. As researchers continue to study it, more details emerge. New interpretations, new functions. But the full picture remains incomplete. Pieces are missing. Literally. Parts lost to time. We can see what it did, but not everything it was meant to do. And that incompleteness is fitting, because this machine is not just an artifact. It is a reminder that human capability is not fixed, that intelligence blooms, fades, and blooms again, that civilizations can reach heights we do not expect, and lose them. Standing before this device, one cannot help but feel humility. Not superiority, not dominance, connection. We are not the first to ask big questions. We are not the first to look up at the sky and wonder. We are not the first to try to measure the universe. We are inheritors of fragments. As we leave this machine behind, another thought follows us. If ancient people could model the heavens with gears, what other knowledge might still be hidden? What other artifacts wait in darkness? The next mystery takes us back to the land, to lines etched so large they can only be seen from above, shapes that defy explanation, messages written not on paper, but on the earth itself. In the next chapter, we rise into the sky, to symbols carved into desert plains, and to a question that refuses to settle. Who were these messages meant for? There are marks humans make to be seen, signs on roads, words on walls, stories written where eyes naturally fall. And then there are marks that seem almost hidden, not because they are small, but because they are too large. So large that standing among them tells you nothing at all. The desert is wide, endless, almost empty. The ground is dry, baked by the sun, its surface cracked and pale. Wind moves freely here, but rain almost never comes. It is the kind of place where time slows down. And across this vastness, lines stretch. A straight, precise, relentless. From the ground, they look like scratches, shallow grooves carved into the earth. You could walk over them and not realize what you're seeing, but rise above them, and the truth appears. Shapes, animals frozen mid-motion, birds with wings spread wide, spirals, triangles, perfectly straight paths stretching farther than the eye can follow. Drawings so large they only make sense from the sky. This is what makes them unsettling. Because when they were made, no one was flying. The people who created these markings lived simply. They farmed. They fished. They built with what the land allowed. They had no aircraft, no satellites, no way to see their work completed from above. And yet the images are accurate, balanced, intentional. The first question comes easily. So, the ground itself offers clues. The surface layer is darker. Beneath it, lighter soil rests undisturbed. By removing the top layer carefully, a line appears pale against dark. And because this land sees almost no rain, the lines remain preserved. So the method is understandable. What is harder to grasp is the vision. Some shapes stretch hundreds of meters. Maintaining proportion at that scale requires planning, measurement, consistency. One mistake would distort the image completely. Yet the figures hold. They are clean, recognizable. This suggests preparation. Perhaps grids marked out with stakes and rope. Perhaps careful counting of steps. Perhaps knowledge passed down through repetition. But even if we accept the method, the question remains: why? Theories abound. Some suggest astronomy, that the lines align with the movement of the sun, moon, or stars, that they functioned as a calendar, a way to track time and seasons. Certain lines do seem to correspond with celestial events, but many do not. Animals do not easily map to constellations. Spirals do not clearly mark equinoxes. The explanation begins to fray. Others propose ritual, that the lines were walked, processions traced across the land, ceremonies performed to honor deities. This idea carries weight. Footprints have been found. Paths seem intentionally cleared. Walking itself may have been the act. In this view, the images were not meant to be seen. They were meant to be experienced. But then why make them so precise? Why ensure that from above they form perfect shapes? Another idea suggests water. This land is dry. Survival depends on rain. Perhaps these figures were prayers, offerings drawn on the earth for gods above, messages meant to be seen from the sky. That idea feels poetic, but it raises another question. Why such variety? Why animals that do not live nearby? Why forms that repeat no obvious pattern? Some believe the lines marked paths to water sources, or indicated sacred geography, connections between places of importance. Yet the sheer scale complicates this. Lines overlap, intersect, change direction without obvious destination. And then there is the question few like to ask. What if these were not messages to the sky, but messages from the ground? A way for humans to inscribe meaning into the land itself. To claim space. To say we were here. Cultures across the world have done this. Stone circles, earthworks, mounds, expressions of presence written into geography. Perhaps this is no different, just grander. What is undeniable is the effort involved. These lines were not accidental. They required coordination, time, shared purpose, which suggests a society with stability, with enough resources to dedicate energy to something beyond survival. And yet, like so many others we've seen, this society did not last. Cities nearby were abandoned. The people moved on, and the lines remained. Nature preserved them, but did not explain them. For centuries, they lay unnoticed, too large to see, too subtle to understand, until humans finally took to the sky. Only then did the full picture appear, and with it confusion. Modern observers projected modern ideas onto them. Runways, maps, signals. These theories captured imagination, but not evidence. Because extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and proof remains elusive. Still, something about the lines resists dismissal. Because they were not necessary. They served no obvious survival function. And yet they were made, which suggests meaning beyond utility. Standing above them now, viewing them from the air, one feels a strange dislocation. These shapes were not made for us. They were not made with our perspective in mind. And yet, only we can see them clearly. That irony lingers. Perhaps the creators never intended them to be viewed from above. Perhaps the shapes were simply byproducts of ritual paths. Or perhaps they knew something we don't. Not about flight, but about perspective. Ancient people understood vantage points. They climbed hills. They built platforms. They observed shadows. They did not need to see everything at once to understand it existed. They trusted patterns, trusted process, trusted repetition. Meaning did not require visibility, only intention. And that may be the key. That the purpose of these lines was not to be decoded, not to be solved, but to be performed. A living act, repeated generation after generation, until the reason no longer mattered. When the people left, the practice ended, but the marks remained. Now we stand in a strange position, seeing something clearly that was never meant for our eyes, trying to translate intention without context. This has happened before, with books we cannot read, machines we cannot fully explain, monuments whose purpose has faded. The pattern repeats. Knowledge survives. Context does not. And so the mystery deepens. Not because the answer is hidden, but because it no longer exists in a form we recognize. As the sun casts long shadows across the desert, the lines darken. They stretch toward the horizon, unmoving, patient. They do not ask to be understood. They simply remain. And as we leave the desert behind, another thought rises. If humans once marked the earth itself with meaning, what other marks did they leave? What other messages remain unfinished? The next mystery takes us underground, into sealed chambers, into gold and shadow, and into a story where death itself became legend. In the next chapter, we descend into a tomb untouched for thousands of years, and into the fear that followed its opening. Some doors are meant to stay closed, not because of what lies behind them, but because of what opening them awakens. The valley is quiet. Jagged cliffs rise sharply against a pale sky, their surfaces scarred by time. The air is dry, heavy with dust and heat. Nothing moves unless the wind commands it. For centuries, this place has held its breath. Beneath the rock, hidden by sand and stone, countless chambers sleep. Most were disturbed long ago. Robbed, stripped, forgotten. But one remained sealed. When the entrance was finally uncovered, it did not look impressive. A narrow stairway, a blocked doorway, no grand monument announcing what lay below. Just stone and silence. At first, there was disbelief. Tombs were almost never found intact. Time, thieves, and chance usually ensured that. Yet here it was, unbroken, untouched. As the seal was breached, something ancient escaped. Not a sound, not a presence, but an idea. The air inside was stale, unmoving for thousands of years. Dust floated in the lantern light as the chamber slowly revealed itself. And what it revealed defied expectation. Gold everywhere, objects stacked carefully, statues standing watch, furniture, chariots, weapons, jewelry. The room shimmered as if frozen in time. This was not decay. This was preservation. At the center lay the resting place of a young ruler, a king who lived briefly and died quietly. Yet in death, he would become the most famous of all. The discovery spread quickly. News traveled far beyond the desert. Newspapers printed dramatic headlines. Photographs circulated. The world leaned in. But fascination soon gave way to fear. Because not long after the tomb was opened, people began to die. At first, it seemed like coincidence. Illness happens. Accidents occur. But the pattern grew harder to ignore. A man involved in the discovery fell ill suddenly. Another died unexpectedly. Then another. And another. Stories circulated. Whispers spread. A phrase took hold. A curse. The idea was irresistible. A punishment for disturbing the dead. A warning from the ancient world. Retribution sealed in stone. The public devoured it. Fear and fascination blurred. Each new death reinforced the story. But history demands restraint. So we must slow down. Look carefully. Separate coincidence from cause. Many of those associated with the tomb lived long lives. Some outlived the discovery by decades. If there was a curse, it was selective, inconsistent. Medical explanations emerged. The tomb had been sealed for centuries. Air trapped inside could contain harmful substances. Bacteria, fungi, spores. Inhaling them could cause severe illness. The desert itself was unforgiving. Heat exhaustion, infection, poor medical care. These were real dangers. And yet, the story did not die. Because the power of a curse is not in its accuracy. It is in belief. Ancient cultures believed deeply in protection after death. Words carved into tombs warned intruders, not always with literal threats, but with spiritual consequence. To disturb the resting place was to disrupt cosmic order. Balance mattered, and imbalance carried weight. The objects found within the tomb reinforced this. Symbols of protection, amulets, spells written for the afterlife. Every item placed with intention. This was not a hoard. It was preparation. The young king was meant to journey safely beyond death. And every measure was taken to ensure that. So when modern humans entered this space, removed objects, broke seals, it felt to many like trespass. Whether the curse was real mattered less than how it made people feel. Uneasy, small, unwelcome. The tomb itself became a threshold between past and present, between science and superstition, between curiosity and consequence. What makes this story endure is not the deaths themselves. It is the timing, the symbolism, the narrative that formed around them. Humans seek meaning in coincidence, especially when the setting feels charged. Standing inside that chamber, one could feel it. The weight of intention, the care taken, the belief that this space mattered. And belief shapes reality. The young king himself remains enigmatic. He ruled briefly, left little record, yet his burial suggests importance beyond his life. Why such richness for a minor reign? Perhaps because death came unexpectedly. Plans rushed. Traditions followed meticulously to compensate. Or perhaps because lineage mattered more than length of rule. In death, he became a symbol of continuity, of divine right, of order restored. The tomb's discovery did more than reveal artifacts. It revealed how much we project onto the past. We saw gold and imagined power, saw death and imagined punishment, saw silence and imagined warning. The ancient world does not explain itself easily, and when it refuses to speak clearly, we fill the gaps. The curse story persists because it serves a function. It reminds us that not everything is meant to be taken, that some boundaries feel real even if we cannot measure them. Science can explain illness, but it cannot erase unease. That unease lingers. Visitors still speak quietly in that valley, still feel watched, still feel like guests. And perhaps that is appropriate. The tomb was not built for us. It was built for eternity, for a journey beyond life, for a belief system where death was not the end, but a transition. Disturbing that transition feels heavy, whether or not consequences follow. As the years passed, the artifacts were studied. displayed, admired. The fear faded into folklore. But the question remains: what happens when we uncover the past? Do we learn? Or do we intrude? This mystery endures because it sits at the intersection of knowledge and respect, of curiosity and humility. And as we step away from the sealed chamber and golden shadows, another mystery waits, one not buried underground, but written in fire and light across the sky. A sudden event that flattened forests without leaving a crater. In the next chapter, we move to the frozen wilderness, to an explosion heard around the world, and to a question science still struggles to answer. Some moments fracture time. They divide the world into before and after, not because of what they destroy, but because of what they refuse to explain. This was one of those moments. The land is endless here, forests stretching beyond sight, rivers winding without names, silence thick enough to press against the ears. In this place, far from cities and borders, morning arrives quietly. Birds stir, trees sway gently. The world follows its familiar rhythm, until it doesn't. Just after sunrise, the sky changes. Not slowly, not subtly. Suddenly, a brilliant light tears across the horizon, brighter than the sun, whiter than fire. For an instant, shadows reverse direction. The ground glows, and then the air explodes. The sound arrives like a wall, a shockwave so powerful it knocks people to the ground miles away. Windows shatter in distant villages. Doors rip from their frames. The earth trembles. Those who witness it describe the same thing. A fireball racing through the sky. A deafening roar. Heat that scorches skin. And then silence. No crater. No impact. No obvious explanation. In the forest beneath the explosion, millions of trees fall. Not randomly. They flatten outward in a vast radial pattern, like spokes from a wheel. At the center, trees remain standing, stripped of branches, burned, scorched, but still upright. This detail matters because it tells a story. Whatever happened did not strike the ground. It exploded in the air. For days afterward, the sky behaves strangely. Across distant regions, nights glow faintly. People report reading newspapers outdoors at midnight. The atmosphere itself seems disturbed. And yet the world moves on. The region is remote. Travel is difficult. News spreads slowly. No immediate investigation follows. Years pass. Then decades. When scientists finally reach the site, the forest has begun to recover. New growth rises between fallen trunks. Nature is already working to erase the scar. They document what remains. The flattened trees, the scorched center, the absence of debris. They search for fragments, metal, stone, anything. They find almost nothing. And this is where certainty collapses. The most accepted explanation is straightforward. A cosmic object entered Earth's atmosphere. A meteoroid, or perhaps a fragment of a comet, traveling at immense speed. As it encountered denser air, pressure increased. Heat built rapidly, and before it could reach the ground, it detonated. An airburst. This explains much. The lack of a crater, the radial tree fall, the massive energy release. But questions remain. Why were no significant fragments recovered? Where did the material go? Why did the sky glow for days? Some suggest the object was composed largely of ice. A comet fragment. It would vaporize almost entirely, leaving little trace. This explanation fits, but not perfectly, because certain minerals found in the soil suggest something else. Traces of elements rarely present in such concentrations. Not definitive, but suggestive. Other theories emerge, some more exotic than others. A small black hole passing through the Earth. Antimatter interaction. Natural gas explosion from beneath the surface. These ideas stretch evidence, but they reveal something important: that the event resists simple classification, and resistance fuels imagination. Eyewitness accounts add to the confusion. Descriptions vary. Some saw a horizontal streak, others a vertical descent. Some reported multiple explosions, others only one. Human memory is imperfect, especially under shock. But even accounting for that, the event remains unusual. Modern simulations attempt to recreate it. Computer models estimate the energy release, equivalent to a large nuclear weapon. And yet, no radiation, no residual heat signature, no long-term environmental damage beyond the immediate zone. The forest regrew. Animals returned. Life resumed, as if the earth itself absorbed the blow. This contrast is unsettling. Destruction without contamination. Power without residue. Standing in the center today, nothing marks the spot. No monument. No crater. Just trees. Growing. It feels wrong, as if something should be here. This is why the mystery endures, because it defies expectation. If a meteor struck, we expect fragments. If an explosion occurred, we expect remains. If something extraordinary happened, we expect extraordinary evidence. Instead, we have absence. And absence invites speculation. Some suggest the event was a warning, a near miss, a reminder of vulnerability. Because if it had occurred over a city, the outcome would have been catastrophic. The event forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Earth is not isolated. The sky is not empty. Objects move through space constantly. Most pass unnoticed. Some burn harmlessly. A few do not. The question is not if something like this will happen again, but when. In that sense, the mystery becomes personal. We like to believe disasters have causes we understand. That danger follows rules. That warning systems will save us. This event challenges that comfort. It arrived without warning, left without explanation. And perhaps that is the most honest part of the story. Nature does not owe us clarity. The explosion of that morning remains one of the most powerful natural events in recorded history. And yet it left almost nothing behind, which makes it easy to forget, easy to dismiss, easy to relegate to theory. But forgetting does not change reality. Somewhere above us, space continues its silent motion. Objects drift. Paths intersect. Timelines cross. Most days nothing happens. Until one day, it does. As we leave the forest behind, one final question lingers. What other events have occurred that we never witnessed? What marks did they leave that we have yet to recognize? The next mystery turns our attention back to humanity, to faith, to an object said to hold divine power, an artifact lost to history, yet alive in belief. In the final chapter, we return to ancient lands, to sacred stories, and to a question that has endured for thousands of years. Some mysteries ask to be solved. Others ask something different. They ask to be remembered. For thousands of years, people have searched for meaning in objects, not because objects are powerful on their own, but because of what we place inside them. Hope, faith, fear, order. Across deserts and mountains, through wars and wandering, stories travel. They change shape. They shed details. But something essential remains. The promise that somewhere something sacred exists, and that if it were found, everything might make sense. The object at the center of this story is never described the same way twice. Sometimes it is a container, sometimes a throne, sometimes a weapon, sometimes a presence. It is said to hold power, not metaphorical power, real power, the kind that alters outcomes, that reshapes destiny. According to ancient accounts, it was built with care, specific materials, exact measurements, strict instructions. Nothing was left to chance. It was not meant to be touched casually. Only certain people could approach it. Only in certain ways. At certain times. When it moved, events followed. Victories. Defeats. Disaster. When it was present, people believed order was assured. When it was absent, chaos crept in. Then one day it vanished. Not destroyed. Not publicly taken. Simply gone. Wars continued. Kingdoms rose and fell. Temples were built and burned. but the object never returned. And yet belief in it survived. Searches began almost immediately. Some literal, some symbolic. Expeditions set out. Texts were studied. Clues were debated. Where could it be? Hidden beneath ruins. Buried before catastrophe. Taken as spoils. Every theory carried weight. Every theory lacked proof. What makes this mystery unique is not uncertainty. It is endurance. Thousands of years later, people still look for it. Not always with shovels, often with imagination. It appears in art, in literature, in whispered speculation. Some believe it was never meant to be permanent, that its purpose was temporary, that once fulfilled, it no longer mattered. Others believe it still exists, waiting, protected, hidden beyond reach. And then there are those who believe something else entirely, that the object was never the point, that it was a symbol, a focus for belief, a way to give structure to faith. Because belief itself has power. It shapes behavior, unites people, creates meaning. An object does not need to exist forever to change history. It only needs to exist long enough to be believed in. Perhaps that is why the disappearance matters. Not because something was lost, but because something was left behind. A question. Throughout this journey, we've seen the same pattern repeat. Civilizations vanish. Knowledge fades. Monuments endure without explanation. Objects survive without context. Time strips certainty away. What remains is mystery. But mystery is not failure. It is an invitation. Each unanswered question reminds us that history is not complete, that our understanding is provisional, that we are always standing in the middle of a story, not at the end. We often assume the past is silent, but it is. It speaks constantly, just not in sentences we recognize. It speaks in gaps, in absences, in things that almost make sense. We want clean conclusions, but the past resists them, because real human experience is messy, incomplete, contradictory. The search for lost objects, lost cities, lost knowledge is ultimately a search for ourselves. We want to know where we came from, what we once knew, what we might have forgotten, because forgetting feels dangerous. Every mystery in this series shares a common thread, not impossibility, but humility. Ancient people were not naive. They were observant, intentional, capable. They watched the sky, measured time, shaped stone, preserved meaning. And sometimes they chose not to explain everything. Perhaps they understood something we struggle with, that not all knowledge needs to be permanent, that some truths are meant to be lived, not archived. We inherit fragments, pieces of stories, echoes. And from those fragments, we build narratives. Some accurate, some imagined. That process never ends. The mystery is not a problem to be eliminated. It is a space to be held. Standing at the edge of what we know, we feel something familiar. The same thing people felt thousands of years ago. Curiosity, love, uncertainty. Those feelings are not weaknesses. They are the beginning of understanding. The past does not demand belief. It asks for attention. As long as questions remain, curiosity lives. As long as curiosity lives, we continue searching. Not always for answers. Sometimes just for connection. Because in the end, the greatest mystery is not what was lost, but why we keep looking. Why across time and culture, humans refuse to stop asking. Perhaps it is because mystery reminds us that we are part of something larger. A long, unfinished conversation between those who came before and those who will come after. And somewhere within that conversation, meaning emerges. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough to guide us forward. So we leave this story not with certainty, but with awareness. That history is alive. That knowledge is fragile. That meaning does not disappear, it transforms. And that the questions we carry may be just as important as the answers we seek. Some mysteries ask to be solved. Others ask something different. They ask to be remembered. For thousands of years, people have searched for meaning in objects. Not because objects are powerful on their own, but because of what we place inside them. Hope, faith, fear, order. Across deserts and mountains, through wars and wandering, stories travel. They change shape. They shed details. But something essential remains. The promise that somewhere something sacred exists, and that if it were found, everything might make sense. The object at the center of this story is never described the same way twice. Sometimes it is a container, sometimes a throne, sometimes a weapon, sometimes a presence. It is said to hold power, not metaphorical power, real power, the kind that alters outcomes, that reshapes destiny. According to ancient accounts, it was built with care, specific materials, exact measurements, strict instructions. Nothing was left to chance. It was not meant to be touched casually. Only certain people could approach it. Only in certain ways. At certain times. When it moved, events followed. Victories. Defeats. Disaster. When it was present, people believed order was assured. When it was absent, chaos crept in. Then one day it vanished. Not destroyed. Not publicly taken. Simply gone. Wars continued. Kingdoms rose and fell. Temples were built and burned. But the object never returned. and yet belief in it survived. Searches began almost immediately. Some literal, some symbolic. Expeditions set out. Texts were studied. Clues were debated. Where could it be? Hidden beneath ruins. Buried before catastrophe. Taken as spoils. Every theory carried weight. Every theory lacked proof. What makes this mystery unique is not uncertainty. It is endurance. Thousands of years later, people still look for it. Not always with shovels, often with imagination. It appears in art, in literature, in whispered speculation. Some believe it was never meant to be permanent, that its purpose was temporary, that once fulfilled, it no longer mattered. Others believe it still exists, waiting, protected, hidden beyond reach. And then there are those who believe something else entirely, that the object was never the point, that it was a symbol, a focus for belief, a way to give structure to faith. Because belief itself has power. It shapes behavior, unites people, creates meaning. An object does not need to exist forever to change history. It only needs to exist long enough to be believed in. Perhaps that is why the disappearance matters. Not because something was lost, but because something was left behind. A question. Throughout this journey, we've seen the same pattern repeat. Civilizations vanish. Knowledge fades. Monuments endure without explanation. Objects survive without context. Time strips certainty away. What remains is mystery. But mystery is not failure. It is an invitation. Each unanswered question reminds us that history is not complete, that our understanding is provisional, that we are always standing in the middle of a story, not at the end. We often assume the past is silent, but it is. It speaks constantly, just not in sentences we recognize. It speaks in gaps, in absences, in things that almost make sense. We want clean conclusions, but the past resists them, because real human experience is messy, incomplete, contradictory. The search for lost objects, lost cities, lost knowledge, is ultimately a search for ourselves. We want to know where we came from, what we once knew, what we might have forgotten, because forgetting feels dangerous. Every mystery in this series shares a common thread, not impossibility, but humility. Ancient people were not naive. They were observant, intentional, capable. They watched the sky, measured time, shaped stone, preserved meaning. And sometimes they chose not to explain everything. Perhaps they understood something we struggle with, that not all knowledge needs to be permanent, that some truths are meant to be lived, not archived. We inherit fragments, pieces of stories, echoes, And from those fragments, we build narratives. Some accurate, some imagined. That process never ends. The mystery is not a problem to be eliminated. It is a space to be held. Standing at the edge of what we know, we feel something familiar. The same thing people felt thousands of years ago. Curiosity, longing, uncertainty. Those feelings are not weaknesses. They are the beginning of understanding. The past does not demand belief. It asks for attention. As long as questions remain, curiosity lives. As long as curiosity lives, we continue searching. Not always for answers. Sometimes just for connection. Because in the end, the greatest mystery is not what was lost, but why we keep looking. Why across time and culture, humans refuse to stop asking. Perhaps it is because mystery reminds us that we are part of something larger. A long, unfinished conversation between those who came before and those who will come after. And somewhere within that conversation, meaning emerges. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough to guide us forward. So we leave this story not with certainty, but with awareness. That history is alive. That knowledge is fragile. That meaning does not disappear, it transforms. And that the questions we carry may be just as important as the answers we seek. Some mysteries do not come from the past. They arrive quietly in the present. And the most unsettling ones are not what we see, but what we almost don't. For most of human history, the universe was silent. Stars burned. Galaxies turned. But nothing spoke. At least nothing we could hear. Then one day, we learned how to listen. The technology was new, fragile, built from curiosity rather than certainty. Large metal structures pointed toward the sky, not to look, but to receive. At first, the signals were familiar. Noise, static, the background hum of the universe itself. Then something different appeared. It was brief, precise, and unlike anything else. The signal arrived suddenly. A sharp spike of energy. Strong, clear, then gone. It did not repeat. It did not linger. It did not explain itself. But it was unmistakable. This was not random noise. Scientists checked their instruments, then checked them again. Equipment failure was the first assumption. It always is. But the data held. Multiple systems detected it. Independent confirmation followed. The signal had structure. A rise, a peak, a fall. Not chaotic, intentional, and most unsettling of all, it came from far away, incredibly far, so far that the energy required to produce it defied intuition. This was not a small event. Whatever sent it had power. At first, the discovery was kept quiet. Not out of secrecy, out of caution. Extraordinary findings demand restraint. Researchers searched for natural explanations. Stellar activity, exotic cosmic objects, unknown but explainable phenomena. Some possibilities fit parts of the data. None fit all of it. The signal did not behave like a star. It did not resemble known cosmic bursts. It was too clean, too focused. And then came the question no one wanted to ask aloud. What if this was intentional? Not a message, not a greeting, just a signal, a sign of activity. The idea was uncomfortable because it forces a shift in perspective. For thousands of years, humans looked at the sky and wondered if we were alone. Now the question felt closer, less philosophical, more immediate. But here is where the story becomes quieter, more human. The signal never returned. No follow-up, no pattern, no explanation. The universe went silent again. And with that silence came debate. Some argued it was nothing special, a rare natural event, an anomaly we do not yet understand. Others argued something else, that the signal was not meant for us, that it was not a message, but leakage. Think about our own world. We broadcast constantly. Radio waves, television signals, radar. These signals spread outward endlessly. We do not aim them at specific recipients. They simply escape. What if we detected something similar? Not communication, but presence. This idea is unsettling, not because it suggests intelligence elsewhere, but because it suggests indifference. If the signal was accidental, then whoever sent it was not trying to contact us. They may not even know we exist. That reframes the mystery entirely. We imagine contact as dramatic, a message, a response. But reality is often quieter. A footprint, a shadow, a signal that arrives once and never again. The deeper scientists looked, the more complex the picture became. The signal's frequency was unusual. The duration was precise. The energy required was extreme. Nothing about it felt casual. And yet it was brief, which raises another possibility. What if this was not a signal at all? What if it was a byproduct, a test, a transition, a moment of activity during something much larger? We may have overheard something never meant to be heard. This is where humility enters the conversation. We assume that if something important happens in the universe, it will happen loudly, repeatedly, in ways we recognize. But the universe does not operate for our convenience. Civilizations may rise and fall without leaving obvious traces. Signals may flash once and never again. Windows of observation may be brief. If intelligence elsewhere exists, it may not align with our timelines, our technologies, Our expectations. We might miss it simply by looking at the wrong moment. This is not pessimism. It is realism. The universe is vast beyond comprehension. Distances are measured in light years. Events unfold over millions of years. Human attention spans are tiny. We listen for decades, maybe centuries. That is nothing. What if signals repeat every 1,000 years? Every million? We might have heard one breath and missed the rest of the conversation. This reframes silence. Silence does not mean absence. It may mean timing. Throughout this series, we've seen the same pattern. Knowledge appears, then disappears. Civilizations peak, then fade. Messages are created, then misunderstood. What if the universe itself follows the same pattern? Moments of activity, followed by long quiet. And what if we are early or late? The signal remains unexplained. Officially, scientifically, but its impact lingers. Not because it answered a question, but because it sharpened one. Are we listening enough? In the right way? At the right time? Or are we waiting for certainty, when all we will ever receive are fragments? The most unsettling part is this. If the signal was artificial, then intelligence exists elsewhere. And if it exists elsewhere, then we are not unique. That realization does not diminish us. It contextualizes us. Just as ancient people were not the center of the world, we may not be the center of the universe. And perhaps that is the lesson. We are part of a much larger story. One that does not pause for us. One that does not explain itself. As we look back at ruins, lost machine, vanished knowledge, we see echoes of ourselves. The signal may be another echo. From somewhere else. From someone else. From a time not aligned with ours. And perhaps we will never hear it again. But knowing that we could changes everything. Because now, when we look up at the sky, we are not just wondering. We are listening. End of part 17. When you're ready, say write part 18. And I'll deliver the final continuation with the same length, depth, and emotional weight. Write part 18. Below is part 18, final extension, written to match the same depth, pacing, tone, and long-form YouTube documentary style as parts 117. Length target met, ~1 501 600 words. Tone, quiet, intimate, forward-looking. Purpose, to close the loop, not with answers but with awareness. Part 18, the future that will become a mystery. Every mystery we have explored shares one quiet truth. It was once the present. At some point, each lost city was alive with voices. Each vanished army marched with confidence. Each machine was understood by someone who knew exactly how it worked. Nothing was mysterious when it was happening. Mystery is what time creates. Right now, as you listen to this, the world feels solid. Cities hum, satellites orbit, data flows endlessly through invisible paths. We believe this moment will be remembered clearly, recorded, preserved. But history does not work that way. Most of what matters never survives intact. Not because it wasn't important, but because importance does not protect against forgetting. Think about what we have seen. Stone monuments without instructions, books without language, devices without manuals, messages without context. These were not failures. They were victims of time. And time does not discriminate. One day our cities will quiet. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. Power grids will shut down. Screens will go dark. Signals will stop. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And long after that happens, someone or something may arrive. They will look at what remains, and they will ask questions. What was this place? What did these people value? Why did they build this way? They will find objects we consider ordinary. Phones, servers, satellites fallen from orbit. They will not understand them immediately. They will not know how they worked. They may find fragments of our language. But without context, meaning will slip. A symbol without a shared story is just a shape. They may assume we worshipped certain things. As screens, as symbols, logos. They may mistake function for ritual, infrastructure for ceremony, and slowly theories will form. Some accurate, some wildly wrong, just like ours. This is not pessimism. It is pattern recognition. History shows us that complexity does not preserve itself. It must be maintained, explained, passed on. When continuity breaks, meaning fractures, we often imagine the future as advanced, smarter, more informed. But intelligence does not guarantee memory. The most advanced civilizations we have encountered were not ignorant. They were interrupted. Floods, droughts, war, migration, collapse. None of these erase intelligence. They erase infrastructure. Once infrastructure fails, knowledge becomes fragile. Consider this. Right now, vast amounts of human knowledge exist only digitally, stored in formats that require power. Machines, software, remove those, and the knowledge vanishes instantly. Stone tablets lasted thousands of years. Paper lasted centuries. Digital memory lasts as long as electricity. That should give us pause. The future mystery is not if we will be misunderstood. It is how. What will survive? What will vanish? What will be misinterpreted? Perhaps our greatest achievements will leave no trace. And perhaps our smallest, strangest artifacts will endure. A plastic object buried in sediment, a symbol etched into metal, a structure too large to dismantle easily. Those fragments will tell a story, but not the whole story. They never do. The people of the future, human or otherwise, will do what we do now. They will fill gaps. They will speculate. They will project. They will argue. They will believe. And from that, new myths will form. This is how mystery is born. Not from ignorance, but from distance. We tend to think of mystery as something behind us, ancient, primitive. But mystery is also ahead of us, waiting. One day, our present will be an excavation site. Someone will stand in silence among ruins we recognize. They will feel the same thing we feel. That quiet sense that something important happened here. They will be right, but they will not know everything, just as we do not. And that is not tragic. It is human. Mystery is not a flaw in history. It is its natural state. Complete understanding is rare. Partial understanding is normal. The past does not owe us clarity. The future will not owe it to those who come after us either. What matters is not perfect preservation. It is intention. Why did we build? Why did we search? Why did we ask questions? Those motivations echo longer than facts. Every civilization we explored was asking the same questions we ask now. Who are we? Where did we come from? What happens next? They looked at the sky. They shaped stone. They recorded meaning in the ways they could. We do the same. Our tools are different. Our materials change. But the impulse is identical. To understand. To endure. To be remembered. The greatest misconception is that mystery means failure. Mystery means continuity. It means the story did not end. Every unanswered question keeps history alive. If everything were known, curiosity would die. And curiosity is the engine of survival. As long as humans ask questions, they adapt. As long as they adapt, they continue. That may be the real lesson hidden in every mystery we've explored. Not that knowledge was lost, but that questioning survived. The future will inherit our questions, just as we inherited those of the past, and they will add their own. So when you look at the sky, at ruins, at strange objects, remember this: you are not just observing mysteries. You are creating them. Every choice we make, every structure we build, every message we leave behind becomes part of a puzzle we will never see completed. And that is okay, because history is not a monument. It is a conversation, one that never truly ends. We are not meant to solve everything. We are meant to keep looking. And somewhere far in the future, someone will look back at us with the same mixture of wonder and uncertainty. They will ask, who were they? What did they know? Why did they disappear? And in that moment, we will have become the mystery.